Hey gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 7 in my series on how to scratch build a butterfly and get it into Source Filmmaker using Blender. Okay, so we've got our model pretty much textured up, and because of what we've done to it by moving some of the vertices around and that kind of thing, we've thrown the model actually out of being symmetric. We're going to close off the UV editor here now. These perforated lines here up at the top. I'm going to pull that to the right, left click on it and pull it to the right, and that's going to blow my 3D viewer back up. I'm also going to shrink down this a little bit so that we can actually see the model a little bit better. So if I move my cursor to center by doing a shift cursor to center, we can see that that origin point is off the center line by a bit. Okay, not that much, but it can make a difference when you're working with your model. Okay, one of the things that we can do right now is, because we have now combined the entire model into one object, we can actually, in object mode, select that object and move the object to the cursor. That will place it back in the center line of the actual, put it back into the center line. But again, looking at the actual model itself, it's still out of symmetry, right? So we can pick up the actual model, move it back so that it is symmetric. And because it's already UV unwrapped, the UVs will stay where they're supposed to. And what we can do is we can actually apply the location of the actual model so that that origin point will come back into center. And the way that we do that is still in object mode, come down here to Object and Apply Location. That will move our cursor back into, or our object origin point back to the center of the actual workspace. Now, floating it around like this, we can see that it's now back into its almost symmetric look. But in actual fact, if we go into edit mode, we're going to find that some of these vertexes are not as symmetric as what they once were. It's not really a problem. What we're worried about now is we're going to get into rigging, and we need the model to be pretty much center of the actual workspace. Okay, tab back out of edit mode, back into object mode. Our model is now centered, and what we're going to do is we're going to start adding bones. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into right ortho mode, just so that I can see where we're at with the actual butterfly. And you can see that we still have that little bit of thickness to the wings, and that's good. So 3, back into right ortho mode, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the first bone, and that first bone is going to be right here in the center. So from here, I'm going to do a shift add. I'm going to come down here to Armature, and I'm going to add a single bone. And there's our single bone. Now, I'm going to make sure that bone is selected, and I'm going to go into edit mode on the bone. Tab. And now that I'm in edit mode, I'm going to select the bone so that I have the entire bone selected. And I'm going to rotate it on the x-axis so that the tail, this is the tail of the bone, rotates down and comes up to somewhere in around here. So it's either pressing in R, for rotate, I want to make sure that I'm on, not on medium point this time, but on individual origin point. And that puts the origin point down here on the actual head of the bone. And I'm going to do an R on the X. I'm going to press RX and type 90 on the numbers above the actual QWERTY keyboard. And that's going to rotate that bone down into the butterfly the way I want it to go. I'm going to tab into edit. I'm going to Z into wireframe mode, and this is what you can now see. Now this bone's a little big, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press scale, S for scale, and I'm going to pull that bone back into the body like this. Make it a little bit smaller. Okay, I can now come back into my top view and start laying out bones. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use the extrude method of creating bones. I'm going to extrude a bone from the tail of this bone, which is going to be my main bone, and I'm going to place it in the head. Then I'm going to create another bone and put it over here for the left wing, and another left top wing, and one down here for the left bottom wing, and then I'm going to extrude and make one for the actual tail so I can rotate the tail. Okay, let's get that done. So here we go. I'm going to press E to extrude. I'm in edit mode, and I'm going to pull that bone out on the Y axis. I pressed Y and just pull it out just a little bit like that. So now I have two bones. These bones are connected, and if I want to move this bone down into the head, I don't want to pull the rest of that other bone down there as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the properties panel and select the bone tab, and here I'm going to disconnect the bone just like that. Now this bone will float freely, but it will retain a connection line to the main bone. It's still parented to the main bone. So I'm going to pull this one down into the head and place the pivot point where I want that head to actually pivot. Probably right about there. That's good. Okay. Now, here's a little trick. If I come into the Tools menu and down to Options and turn on the X-axis mirror, what I can do now is I can create left and right bones on the fly. So here I'm going to reselect the main bone and make sure it's completely selected. I'm going to hold down Shift E to extrude a bone, and I'm going to pull it out on the Y-axis. Just like that. That's all I'm going to do with that one. Okay? If I look over here in my outliner and expand my bones, what I'm going to find is that this is the head bone I created, but now when I shift extruded this bone, I ended up with two, a left and a right bone. Now, what I have to do is I have to select each one individually and disconnect them from the parent bone. But now that they're disconnected like that and still parented to the bone, I can grab that left bone and pull it to the left, and the right one will move at the same time. And they will retain their symmetry based on where I place them. Okay, so I'm going to pull that one forward. This is going to be the front wing, and I'm going to place it right about there. Now you see that this is slightly off-centered, and that's because we did that wonderful let's move the right wing into the body thing with the vertexes. We can fix this up later when we remove the x-axis mirror. I'm going to do the same thing with the main bone. I'm going to select the main bone again. I'm going to shift extrude and pull it out on the y-axis. So I'm going to type Y and pull it out on the y-axis. And now I've created two new bones that I have to disconnect. Disconnect that one, and if I click on top of it, it'll light up there. I'm going to grab the left bone, and I'm going to pull that one back for the rear wing. And as you can see, the left and right bone move at the same proportional scale to the actual bone, to the main bone. Now, if I just want to create one bone, I'm going to select that bone, and this is going to be the tail bone. I only want to create one bone. I'm going to just press E, not Shift E, and that will extrude on the y-axis one bone. There we go. I'm going to select that bone, and here you can see it only created the one bone. So I'm going to disconnect that, and I'm going to pull that one right back here to the tail, right there, and I'm going to rotate it by 180 degrees because I want the tail pointed towards the end of the actual mesh. So I'm going to press R and type in 180 on the keyboard above the QWERTY letters and put that there. Okay, this has pretty much got all the bones that we require with the exception of the antenna. For the antenna, this is going to be a little bit different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the head bone because I want the actual antenna parented to the head bone. I'm going to extrude a bone. No, I'm going to shift extrude two bones because I want a left and a right. So shift E to extrude on the Y, and I'm going to pull it out of the head bone. This will give me two bones out of the actual head. Bone one, we have to rename our bones yet. Okay, so there they are. Select them and disconnect from the parent so that we can move them freely. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the left bone and I'm going to move it to the base of the antenna. Right about there. Now I'm going to grab the tail of the bone and I'm going to pull it down here to the end. I'm going to add a little bit of, I'm going to pull it over and I'm going to place it on the end of the antenna. Don't be concerned yet, we're not done. Okay, so first off, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually come out of edit mode from the bones and select the left antenna. The left, you got to remember, we are now all one object, right? So I'm going to select a vertex in that antenna. I'm going to hold down Control and press L, and what that will do is it will select the entire antenna. Okay, I'm going to count the number of segments I have between where it starts to flare out and the base here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I've got 18 segments in the antenna that I want to control with the bone. Plus I have one more for the actual flared it's not going to bend on its own. It's going to be controlled by one bone. So 19. Now that I know that number, I'm going to come back, select the bone. I'm going to go into edit mode, select that bone again, and I'm going to come up here into the tools panel and subdivide that bone, if I can find it, right here. And down here, I'm going to type 19. I now have 19 segmented bones in a line that I can adjust. Now to position these bones back in, this is where it gets a little bit tedious, and I'll do a couple and then I'll go into time lapse until I get them done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the edge loop of the end of the antenna. I'm going to move my cursor to that selection, come out of edit mode, select the bone, go into edit mode, select this bone, and use the Shift S selection to cursor. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to go out of edit mode, back into object mode, select the antenna, move to the next edge loop, and I'm going to actually place the tail of the bone at that point. So I have to use my Shift S, cursor to selected, come out of edit mode, select the bones, grab the tail of that bone, and do a Shift selection to cursor. So now this bone runs from here to here. And it's just a matter now of repeating the process for the rest of the bones. Select the edge, the edge loop, cursor to selected. That puts it in the center of the tube, right? Come out of edit mode, select the bone, grab the next segment tail, Shift selection to cursor. That has this bone now running between these two segments. And again, back into object mode, select the antenna, select the edge loop, in edit mode, Shift cursor to selection, grab, bounce back between modes, grab the bones, go into edit mode, select the tail, selection to cursor, and now I'm going into time lapse to finish this off. Okay, now that this is done, I found that I actually added one too many bones. All I have to do now, come back into edit mode, select that bone, hit X, delete the bone, grab, come back in here, go into edit mode, find the center point of this particular thing, move my cursor there, come back into the bone armature, put it in edit mode, and do a selection to cursor. So now what I've got is both sides done at the same time because I was in mirror mode. x-axis mirror, and everything is laid out pretty much the way that I need it to be. Now, why did I do this? All these bones? Well, simply due to the fact that if I take this into pose mode now, and actually this won't work because we haven't actually assigned the armature to the mesh. But if I select all these bones, see, what I'm going to get is when I rotate them, I'm going to get a nice swing motion on them. Okay? So the mesh is going to like follow the bone, and it's going to be pretty cool. Okay, now that that's done, I could go through, I could disconnect the bones, shrink them down so that they're smaller, but I'm not going to bother doing that right now, because what I have to do now is I have to weight paint the actual model to the bones, which is what we'll be doing in the next segment. So with that, I say private Jack out.